What happens in the afternoon of a person's life? Let's find out. How's it going, Revision Squad? It's me, Liam, aka Mr. Knight, aka DystopiaJunkie, and today I'm back with some more poetry analysis for you. This video is for Philip Larkin's poem Afternoons, which appears on page 17 of your WJEC Eduqas poetry anthology. Before we get too much further into the video, I recommend that you have your anthology out and open to page 17, a pen for making notes, at least 3 different highlighters, and some extra paper too, just in case you run out of note space. Right, if you've watched any of my other videos in this series, you should know the drill by now. If somehow you've not watched any of those videos yet, then a link for the playlist that they all appear in should be appearing on screen about now. So how about you click it and go through all of the poems in the anthology. Right, in this video I will read the poem, go through its context, provide a close reading, consider the poem's mood, meaning and the poet's motivation. I'll also think about themes, and then finally at the end of the video, because I'm super nice like that, there will be an optional revision task for you to complete. If this video does help you with your GCSE revision, then please do consider dropping it a like and subscribing to my channel DystopiaJunkie. That way all upcoming revision content will end up in your subscription feed, and if you turn on that notification bell, you'll even receive a notification whenever I drop a new video too. Okay, so generic cringy YouTuber self-promotion aside, here is the poem. Make sure you're following along either on screen or by using your anthology. Afternoons. Summer is fading. The leaves fall in ones and twos from trees bordering the new recreation ground. In the hollows of afternoons, young mothers assemble at swing and sandpit, setting free their children. Behind them, at intervals, stand husbands in skilled trades, an estate full of washing, and the albums lettered "Our Wedding" lying near the television. Before them, the wind is ruining their courting places that are still courting places, but the lovers are all in school. And their children, so intent on finding more unripe acorns, expect to be taken home. Their beauty has thickened. Something is pushing them to the side of their own lives. So there we go, that is the poem in full. Let's dive straight into the poem's context. You know why it's important by now. Philip Larkin was born in 1922, so just after World War I, and died in 1985. He was an English poet, novelist and librarian. He was homeschooled by his mother and older sister until he was 8. Friends and family rarely visited his childhood home during this time, and he had few friends or close relationships in this early stage of his life. He eventually went to school and later Oxford University. He studied English, and World War II broke out, but because of his poor eyesight, he failed his military medical examination. Larkin had various short to medium-term romantic relationships, but nothing really long-lasting. He often attributed poems to the women he was romantically involved with, and at one time he was in 3 relationships at the same time. You could argue that he was a bit of a sexist because of this. Larkin was the head librarian at the University of Hull until he died of cancer in 1985. He was awarded many honours for his writing and was given the chance to become Poet Laureate in 1984, but he turned this opportunity down. This may be partly because he was known as a solitary Englishman who hated fame and didn't really want to attach himself with public literary life. He is famous for writing poems which contain detailed observations about everyday life and everyday relationships. Critics say that his poetry is generally negative, miserable, and melancholic. Now, thinking about Britain in the 1960s, which was when this poem was written and when it's set, we have these pieces of contextual information to consider. So in Britain in the 1960s, gender roles were much more regimented. Women were expected to stay at home, raise children, and tend to domestic chores, and men were expected to go out and work. Furthermore, in Britain in the 1960s, the government was taking steps to get rid of rundown housing and was replacing it with modern estates which had plenty of green spaces. Okay, so now that we've read the poem and considered its context, we can begin to analyse it. So now's your chance to grab those highlighters and to set up your own key, using one colour for imagery, one for language, and another for structure. A poem's title is, of course, a potential source for analysis, and this poem, it's no different. So we can think about the pluralization of the title, and also we can think about what an afternoon might be a metaphor for, especially in relation to a time in someone's life. If you'd like to pause the video to give yourself some time to answer these questions on your own first, now's a great time to do so. The title here has been made plural, so it's not about one afternoon, but all afternoons. This suggests monotony, the boring repetition of life. I like looking at times of day as symbols for a time in a person's life. Midday is the day's peak, and it is generally considered that your late teens and early to mid-20s are your prime years. After this comes your late 20s and 30s, the time in your life that is usually considered to be the settling down stage, the time in your life where you might get married, have children, buy a house, etc. And funnily enough, that seems to be the age of the adults who feature in this poem. Here is the poem's first stanza, and there's quite a bit that we can say about it. In fact, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions that we're going to be thinking about. So pause the video, try to make your own annotations, and then come back and see what I think. Remember, having multiple interpretations for the same quotation is a high order skill. The poem opens with a declarative sentence, a statement. This creates a neutral, observational tone to the poem, perhaps appropriate for a Larkin poem, as he is known to be an observer and perhaps a bit of an outsider. You could choose to see summer as metaphorical as well. If you do, then it has a similar effect to the metaphorical afternoon of the poem's title. It reflects the stage of life that the people of the poem are in. So a recreation ground is another way of saying a park, which have connotations of suburbs and suburban life. Although the trees around the park seem quite natural, the park is new, and the trees around them have probably been placed there on purpose, meaning that their naturalness is ingenuine. This makes suburban life seem over-controlling, because even nature has been controlled. Okay, so there can be multiple interpretations for the word hollows. On one hand, it could suggest that the afternoons are empty and meaningless. But on the other hand, it could suggest that there is something safe and homely about the afternoons, as the living spaces of some animals are called hollows. By calling the people in this poem young mothers, Larkin is stripping them of their sense of individuality. Their value lies only in their motherhood, not in who they are otherwise as people. The image, setting free their children, suggests that domestic life, perhaps in its routines and apparent mundanity, is like a cage or a trap. After all, you cannot set something free if it already is free. The enjambment has the effect of making this poem seem relentless, since there are very few pauses at the end of this stanza's lines, and this relentlessness is just like the mundanity experienced by the people in the poem. Their lives, it seems, are incredibly, almost inescapably, mundane. And here we have the poem's second stanza. Just like the first one, despite being relatively short, there's a lot going on here. Certainly, there's a lot that we can say about it. Indeed, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions for this stanza. So, how about you pause the video and have a think? Right then, so the prepositional phrase behind them suggests that there is a distance between the husbands and wives, because they are not together or side by side, but in front of and behind of each other. The caesura reinforces the idea established by the prepositional phrase. There is distance between the husbands and wives. Larkin seems to be a bit critical of married life, perhaps reflecting his own unhappy romantic life, as he had been engaged a few times, but never married. Skilled trades makes it pretty obvious that Larkin is writing about ordinary working class people. Depending on how sympathetic your reading of this poem is, there could be a slight argument for Larkin appearing to be classist in this poem. I absolutely love the image and estateful of washing. As Larkin has made up a word, estateful, and yet it still creates such a vivid image in my mind. Piles and piles and piles and piles and piles and piles and piles of washing. This image really emphasises that the domestic workload is never ending, and perhaps suggests that the women are trapped by it. The image of the wedding album lying near the television suggests that the love between the couples has mellowed and has become taken for granted, as the wedding album, a symbol of what their love once was, has been discarded and left by the TV. Those last two lines suggest that the women are powerless. They can only stand and watch as their courting places are ruined. Their powerlessness is suggested because if you saw something that you cared about being ruined, you would probably try to do something about it, unless you knew it was too late or that really you couldn't do anything about it. And here is the poem's final stanza, which is just as analytically rich as the others. And so there are another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 questions for us to think about. Do let me know what your answers are to these questions down in the comments section. So if you would like my answers to those questions, you're going to have to wait just a little bit longer, I'm afraid, because this is the end of part 1 of my analysis of afternoons. In the meantime, why don't you give those questions a go for yourself? And of course, as I say in all these videos, please do share some of your ideas down in the comment section too, because I think it would be amazing to see a dialogue between myself, yourself and fellow students of different ideas that we have about the poems. To make sure that you don't miss part 2, which is coming really soon, make sure that you've subscribed to my channel and turned on that notification bell as well, so that way you definitely won't miss the video when it does indeed come out. As ever, thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have an awesome rest of the day. Cheers.